Hi, this is Ron Painter, CEO for the National Association of Workforce Boards and your host on Workforce Central, the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards. You're about to listen to another episode of Workforce Central, and we're glad that you did. But before we bring the podcast to you, I want to remind you that NAWB's annual forum will be held June 24, 25, 26 in Washington, D.C. Indeed, that's true. We're going to be trying to bring a number of people, as many as were allowed by orders of the District of Columbia and the Center for Disease Control, to bring together to talk about workforce issues. If you can't join us in person, why don't you join us virtually? To learn more about Forum 2021, go to www.nawb.org/forum. That's nawb.org/forum to learn more about Forum 2021, June 24, 25, 26 in Washington, D.C. Thanks.
Welcome to Workforce Central, the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards. Stay tuned as we explore the latest resources, thoughts, and trends in workforce development. And now, here's your host, Ron Painter.
Welcome to another edition of Workforce Central, the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards from Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Ron Painter. And we're going to have a conversation today that I'm really looking forward to. We have a strategist, an expert on this whole notion of the world we're entering, flexible jobs, both from my perspective as the employee, but also from the employer perspective, and maybe a little combination of both. She's involved with the government, been advising the U.S. government. So I want to say hello to Mika Cross. Mika, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here today and to talk to you about all these exciting topics.
Yeah, this is really, again, I'm really looking forward to it. Let me tell you a little bit about Mika. She is a widely acclaimed workforce expert, speaker, strategist, and innovator on these subjects about not only what's going on here in the U.S. with regard to workforce initiatives, but does work around the globe, both in terms of what's happening to work, but also in terms of the culture change, which I really want to ask you about when we're talking about skills, Mika. Her career includes 20 years of public service with assignments throughout the U.S. intelligence community, stint with the U.S. Department of Labor, Office of Management and Budget, but also both an enlistee and an officer in the U.S. Army, and certainly advising. And we're going to talk about veterans. She is no stranger to guest appearances across U.S. and global television and media, whether social media, broadcast. She is a graduate from the University of Louisville, and we have to acknowledge the Cardinals and the ACC. Got to fit that in, and has a master's in business administration from Georgia Southern University. So again, Mika, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
One of the folks that and how we got connected, one of the folks that you help advise is an organization, a company called Flex Jobs. Can you tell us a little bit about who are Flex Jobs? What is Flex Jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure to talk about Flex Jobs. They're like family. I spend a lot of time there. And even before I joined them as the Vice President of Employer Engagement and Strategic Initiatives, they were a close collaborator of mine, even when I was in the federal government space, because Flex Jobs has been doing this for nearly 15 years. So well before the global pandemic mandated that we all shift to a more flexible and remote or hybrid posture, Flex Jobs was already offering this amazing job-seeking platform to more than 4 million job seekers over its inception to connect with legitimate, hand-screened, researched, and verified flexible and remote jobs. And really, that encompasses the gamut of flexible work. So it has the largest inventory of gig and freelance work. It has seasonal, part-time, intermittent, flexible job schedules, part-time remote, and fully remote positions, both inside the US. Some are location specific and some are global. It's a great platform because they also screen out all the advertisements. They make certain to their job seekers that they are free from scammers, which in this market, in today's regular job platforms, you simply just can't guarantee that, number one, you're connecting with a legitimate employer that really offers the kinds of flexibility that you're looking for. But also there's a risk of job scammers and bad actors who are really looking to take advantage of people who are desperate to find remote and flexible jobs, especially during a global pandemic like which we are experiencing. The great thing about FlexJobs is they offer a 100% guarantee to its job seekers, and they've already done the work. So again, they hand screen and research every single employer, but also every last one of their jobs. So when you become a member of FlexJobs, you're able to really rest easy that you're going to connect with the right kinds of jobs and that you can filter on the kinds of flexibilities that will fit your life.
And it does surprise me, Mika. You've mentioned they've been around a while. FlexJobs, remote work has been around for a while. I guess we're just really a lot of us are discovering that because of the pandemic, right? Suddenly we realized that maybe we had talents that could be utilized even if the work that we were doing was temporarily gone. You've done work, you've looked at what degrees, the best degrees to work from home and what I could expect from the kinds of teleworking. What can you tell us about what you're learning matters maybe in the market? I don't know if that's a great way to say it, but what degrees, if I'm thinking about maybe going back to school to finish a degree, or I'm thinking about, I'm getting really serious about what do I want to take in school. Are there degrees that seem to be better suited for this?
I think you might be surprised, Ron, actually, in the sense that, like, for instance, on a platform that's a specialized niche platform like FlexJobs, we have more than 51 different job occupational categories with different levels of expertise, from entry level to mid-level to senior C-suite executive level kinds of positions. These are positions that attract people like part-time retirees, caregivers, working parents, military spouses, individuals with disabilities or hidden medical conditions, or just your average Joe who might want a little bit of flexibility and, like us in the DC area, wants to avoid a commute or have less of a commute and more of life. And so when you're thinking about what kinds of skills and background, it really varies, And although the thousands of employer partners that FlexJobs has been working with before, which include mom and pop startups, nonprofit, academia, government, Fortune 500. These are employers that run the gamut. Although we have been doing that, as you know, what we're learning from the pandemic is more employers who weren't doing that before and embracing that kind of working are now having to do so and are realizing the value of what it means as part of their employer brand and as part of their talent acquisition strategy, but also in terms of retention. So there are many different reasons and also opportunities for learning that newish employers to remote work, or those that are transitioning now to either fully remote, which my colleagues at Virtual Work Insider call a frog, a fully remote organization, or those who weren't traditionally working this way and now are going to go back maybe post-pandemic to like a hybrid model. They are realizing and recognizing the return on investment and the value that offering all kinds of flexibilities, because it wasn't just remote work and it wasn't just fully remote work. It was also this sense of like, how are we going to allow people to balance all of the needs that are happening in their lives, whether that be medical issues, grieving loved ones and family members who we may have lost, parenting during work hours, caregiving during work hours, and all of the same. So I think those are some of the most important things. I will also say that the employers that I've seen that offer these kinds of styles and who have an appetite to do that forevermore, let's say, in terms of their future of work strategy, are really getting more away from like what kinds of like degrees or formalized training are necessary, and more of how can we screen and assess applicants for success in a remote environment.
That is a great point, and it's something that I wanted to ask you, because I wanted to ask you, so both in terms of let's think about, I have a position, somebody just left my company, they've been here 10 years. So I have not been on the market for this position in 10 years. What are the things that I could be thinking about, should be thinking about if I want to think about a remote worker? I've never done this. I hand you a position description, again, that was written a decade ago. Walk me through, like, what is an employer, or what are some of the things I can be thinking about? Are you seeing more employers focus on the skill and the competency and a credential versus, looking at your resume, the University of, Louisville, mine, the University of Pittsburgh, oh, check, good school. Are employers more open to different kind of hiring?
I think yes. I think it's a culture change sort of paradigm, though. So let's take the nation's largest employer, Uncle Sam, the U.S. federal government, 2.1 million employees globally, right? Across the span of the federal workplace. There was a recent executive order put out that all federal positions are going to move away from a standard education requirement and focus more on the skills and competencies that we want to attract and keep within the federal government workspace. This, of course, is going to take a lot of conversations and training for hiring managers, for HR, especially those who have been around a couple decades or more. But also it's going to take a different approach to how you advertise your positions. So let's talk about the pandemic and the impact of working women, to the tune of millions of working moms who have had to attrit from the civilian labor force because of the ridiculous strain on being able to juggle both career and being a homeschooling parent at the same time for many women who are, child rearing. And so if you're considering this as part of your strategy, let's say, maybe you're trying to capitalize as an employer on the remote and flexible options that you've learned to embrace over the past year, you will want to think about how to map that to your strategy for recruiting and attracting and hiring top talent from women or people of color or people globally in certain different industries who may not have that education experience. So maybe you start integrating the words into your position descriptions to cast the net widely and attract new and different segments of talent. So you will want to, in plain language, promote the kinds of flexibility that you're offering.
I know that, this really, the impact of the pandemic has been disproportional to women. But let's just say that some of us have come to recognize there is some work-life balance and we've gotten to spend more time with our kids. Do you see that as something that's going to be lasting? Are we going to forget that when we get to the other side of the pandemic? Are we going to immediately want to run back to the 9 to 9, 5 days a week? Or are we really going to realize we can do this remotely and we're going to be looking for those opportunities?
Well, I certainly hope we are, because I think it would be incredibly hard to message to someone who's been working 14 months this way that all of a sudden we're going to require you to go in. I think we're going to need to reverse engineer our discussions around what work is and what are the purposes of in-person work versus having the option. Keep in mind, not everyone wants to. In fact, many surveys and workplace assessments looking towards the future are suggesting that maybe up to 15% might want to stay fully remote, but the majority of people are really looking for options and choice and having the ability to do some in person and some from home. But the fact of the matter is, Ron, we don't know what the post-pandemic world will look like. Some organizations are thinking about, let's capitalize on space and reduce our leased office costs. We're going to save all this money. We're going to have collaborative workspaces where everyone can come together and do this, and this. But hold on, right now in this moment, is it wise to think about everyone coming together at the same time? Even if it is for the purpose of innovation and collaboration. The other thing is this idea of career privilege, because people who are knowledge workers.
Wait, career privilege.
Career privilege.
Tell me more about this. This is an interesting, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. So career privilege is a term I've read about and I picked up. I love using it because it's sort of enlightening when you think about the kinds of positions that are typically ever ready for remote and flexible work. Those typically are your positions that are behind the computer, not customer facing, not in industries of blue collar or hospitality or customer service, retail. These are the positions that, are sort of the support roles, data scientists, technology, some marketing, HR, things of that nature. But if you're looking to provide equity and access to employment opportunities, well, what's nice about FlexJobs is we have all those 51 different kinds of occupations, from retail to hospitality to customer service to all of those, even at the entry level, in addition to the other kind of traditional roles that would be have thought of as being eligible for remote or flexible work. So consider the impacts to the people who were not sitting in positions like mine, which is considered a knowledge economy kind of role, who could easily transition to staying fully remote or transitioning to fully remote. There is a significant digital divide around the globe, and we need to really consider what it means to upskill and reskill and prepare the workforce for what it takes to compete in a flexible and remote job economy. And it's a lot different. When FlexJobs educates job seekers on what it takes to locate, find, and compete for a flexible or remote role. And by the way, remote jobs are the most desired, the highest desired kinds of positions. I mean, it's a very, very competitive market. And our employers are getting thousands upon thousands of people applying for these jobs, but haven't necessarily understood how to navigate, like positioning your skills in a certain way for a remote job, and also those remote interviewing skills that is necessary.
I want to come back and talk about the employer culture. Just want to remind listeners, you're listening to Workforce Central, the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards. I'm Ron Painter from Washington, D.C., Doug Forrest at the controls. And my guest today is Mika Cross. And we're talking about remote work, and we're talking about the remote worker and the remote employer. So I want to come back, Mika. The culture of a company we know is important. Like how I feel about that company, how I feel about the people I work with. What are you working on with employers around now that they're excited, they see that they can get a lot more talent interested in their job or their company because they're opening it up to remote. What do you start talking to the company about its culture, about how it orients staff? We, for example, have hired during the pandemic. There are staff members that we have that I have never met in person. So we're trying to figure this out. What do you tell employers about how to think about their culture and adjust some of their culture?
I think I first don't tell them anything. I listen. And so what I'm trying to listen for in any organization, no matter what sector, is what are your highest objectives and priorities for people? Do they have ongoing initiatives around diversity and equity and inclusion that are really important in certain sectors? Let's talk about the IT sector and trying to attract more women and minorities to that sector. How can we integrate some of this flexible and remote work options to achieve those kinds of human capital goals? I also like to listen for, what is their job search capacity and what has their experience been with finding and attracting the right kinds of recruits and talent? Because it's very frustrating, and it takes a lot of time and resources for these recruitment teams to, let's say do a virtual job fair or do some outreach and hiring events. And if they're getting 15,000 applicants, but only 2 of them are the right kinds of skill sets, that's a branding issue. That's a marketing issue, and that's a communications issue. So just as important as it is for the job seeker experience to connect with a trusted resource, it's just as important for the employers on the employer engagement side and partnership side to lean on the resources that, have a ready remote or flexible job seeker base who are talented, motivated, skilled, and somewhat experienced, or can connect you with channels to talent that can start serving as a pipeline. Like, FlexJobs has a number of economic development community partners. So on the ground in rural communities like the Aleutian Islands and Hawaii and Kansas and Utah and New Mexico and Kentucky, there are workforce investment activities that are already going on to train and equip those job seekers who are coming out of industries that, quite frankly, have never worked remotely before. But through that employer engagement and partnership, we can bring employers who have 46,000 jobs to fill in a year to those specific communities and make that connection, because the most successful employment outcomes happen at the local level. It comes from those relationships.
So as local workforce boards in their region sit down with economic development, the whole notion of the connection to access to high-speed, reliable broadband really ought to be top of mind for rural areas. Do you see this as I don't want to say it's an equalizer, but do you see this as a really unique time in opportunity for rural communities to be a player, to attract that talent?
Absolutely, because, traditional economic development initiatives were around building infrastructure and tax base and, attracting brick and mortar employers and entrepreneurs to come to their location and live and work. And now they can do this in a more portable fashion. I'm not suggesting it's the only solution, but it's a very viable one of many solutions. And I'd like to think that over the last year, because of investments in remote learning and remote education, because of the pandemic, there may be more opportunity to bring more employers who typically didn't look to, like my home state of rural Maine or another location, as a ripe place to tap talent. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. It's connecting with the right partners that already have like that robust sort of inventory of employer partners, of which, FlexJobs has 5,000 plus of, versus having to go out and do it yourself. It's great to do that community engagement at the local level, but it's also nice to have a partner on a global scale that can bring opportunity to your rural communities in a quicker way that has already been verified and researched and trusted and vetted.
So they got to make sure they have access to high speed, reliable broadband and really good coffee. I mean,
good coffee is
really good coffee. Yeah. I mean, if there's some rural part of the US that wants to attract me or Canada to come move, they're going to have really, really good coffee.
Or co-working spaces. I mean, we're seeing a lot of investment back in there, which I love. In fact, in Bangor, Maine, I go visit Covort, which is an amazing, well, under normal circumstances, I go and visit, but it's an amazing co-working space, very cheap and affordable. And some employers are even offering subsidies to use those spaces because, again, not everybody, think about it. We have a multi-generational workforce, labor force here.
We do.
5 generations worth of workers. We have really significant challenges with the aging workforce and keeping them and sort of overcoming the misperceptions with employers of the value of an aging workforce versus really young talent. Look at the high schoolers who are out of work and displaced, and all the way up, until people into their 70s and 80s are still working. So being able to offer options back to your recommendations for employers is really important. And making sure it's clear. Is it flexible schedules? Are you allowed to work at different times? Do you require part-time or full-time opportunities? Can people choose whether to work fully remote, or are they required to be on a hybrid environment? And that's really a strategy that has to be considered based on the nature of work and the position. But when you allow people to choose, they bring their best to work, no matter where it is.
So work to be done in bringing the managers, those of us that manage others, making sure we're attuned to to help. How do we really help the people that we're working with succeed, whether or not they're at the office or the cubicle next to us, or whether they're 100 miles, 1,000 miles away. I want to give you an opportunity before we close to talk about a group of people that's I know is very close to your heart, very close to us at NAWB as we work with transitioning military spouses. It's a talent pool that we don't connect well with. What are some lessons we could learn about connecting to the military spouses and to the transitioning military?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's been so many challenges in the past. I mean, certainly military spouses, 90% of whom are women. And the fact that by virtue of their transient lifestyle, they have typically had to resign or leave a position when their service member is relocating, deploying, or going on TDY because of the requirements of having to hold down the household duties as well. And who can rely on just one income anymore? So, this is a really huge issue. Now, not all military spouses are looking for a job. Some of them are very interested in entrepreneurship. But when you're starting up a new business for yourself, you may need a little income. So maybe connecting with a remote freelance or gig kind of opportunity until you get your business off the ground is a great way to supplement your income while you are standing up your business. In terms of tapping the military spouse market, there is, on FlexJobs platform, we just promoted, every year we do, in fact, we promote our top 100 remote companies to watch list. And those are the top 100 employers who offer the most by volume of job postings in the year prior of remote friendly job opportunities. 20% of the 2021 top 100 lists on FlexJobs were already military spouse employment program partners through the Department of Defense. So wow. Many of these flexible employers are already having these structured military spouse and military veteran kind of focused hiring initiatives, but there's a huge opportunity. 80% of them didn't have formal partnerships with the DoD. Think about that. If they already have perfectly suitable jobs for people that need access because of the virtue of their transient lifestyle, why wouldn't we be talking to them about how to connect with the DoD and Blue Star families and hiring heroes and all of those things?
But it's also it also struck me as you were saying that, hey, if I'm an employer and I have a really good employee, and we know that even in the midst of the high levels of unemployment, I hear from local workforce boards all the time about employers having a hard time finding the skills they're looking for. If I have a really good employee, this is a time for me to think about restructuring the job, right? So that when we talk about military spouses, you're right. We always think about it's a woman, but that's not always the case, right? There's more men now that are military spouses. If I've got a really good military, it's time for me to think about how do I structure my job, right? So when they move, it's okay. They can stay attached to me.
Yeah, and consider this from the spouse perspective. Many people in the federal government space consider this an issue of national security, and I absolutely agree 100%. I used to work for the Department of Labor, Veteran Employment and Training Service. We were looking at issues of licensure and credentialing and making sure that there's reciprocity amongst states. We are looking for access to jobs that are portable. And now, by virtue of the pandemic, you have this perfect opportunity to pilot out, the programs that we've been sort of evangelizing over time. I think that for the military spouse community, again, it's going to take that partnership to help them on the DoD side and through even the military spouse focused TAP programs and Department of Labor curriculum, prepare them for what life is like in a remote job market. It looks different and it feels different than when you apply and compete and interview in a traditional environment. It really does. And again, you have like 3 times the amount of competition especially for a fully remote job than you would if you were competing with a traditional brick and mortar in the office kind of position. So it's going to take helping to restructure and position your skills. Again, back to that skills-based oriented kind of resume. If you've worked remotely before, making sure you put on your resume remote office or telework office so people can see at the top.
That's now a skill, right? That's now.
And that you've had experience working this way. Are you a collaborator? Are you a connector? Are you an effective communicator? Do you have technology skills? Have you had experience leading remote meetings or hybrid virtual meetings? Do you use Zoom, Teams, Slack? What are all those kinds of, it's not just, did I get a bachelor's degree from the University of Louisville, go Cards, but it's what do I bring to the table? Am I an experience or could I be an asset as a virtual leader? When I joined FlexJobs, I was hired as a vice president in a fully remote organization. I never met my team in person other than the ones I already knew. Because like I said, I had been collaborating with them for quite a while. So again, it's really preparing the workforce to compete and position themselves successfully in this digital economy of work that we're working in.
Wow. Tons of stuff to be thinking about. Mika, if I want to learn more about FlexJobs, how do I do that?
Well, really easy. You can go on flexjobs.com. And what's great about FlexJobs is they have resources like blog posts, guides, recorded webinars. Even if you're not a member of FlexJobs, you can access it pretty readily. If you're an economic development, lead or partner looking to partner with an organization like FlexJobs, there's also a great landing page around economic development and community partners. We often subsidize bulk memberships for communities that are looking to bring more remote and flexible job options to communities. So there's a lot of ways to get in touch there. Yeah. And if you're looking for me, you can find me on LinkedIn.
Now, if I need help, which I can't imagine that employers have this down. If I'm looking for help as an employer around how to rethink, that position, again, my employee, 10 years, they were here, they're now gone. Mm-hmm. If I want help in rethinking that or rethinking my culture as a result of the pandemic, how do I get a hold of you?
Well, the easiest way is to either look on FlexJobs or look on LinkedIn to find me specifically. That's my favorite platform to play in the career space. I am an expert social networker. I'm also on Twitter, which you can find me just by my name @Mika_Cross. And my LinkedIn profile, you can find me by my name, Mika Cross, but I'm also deemed the work-life champion of the universe.
All right. And it's Mika.
It is Mika.
Cross. Mm-hmm. Cross. Mika Cross, thanks for joining me today. I appreciated the conversation. And I know we're going to be back together again for more discussion. So I want to thank you.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank people for tuning in. You've been listening to Workforce Central, the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards. I'm your host, Ron Painter. As I mentioned, Doug Forrest has been at the control. If there's something that you heard today that you'd like additional information about, please get in touch with us. Or if there's a topic you would like us to cover on Workforce Central, you can do that by emailing us nawb@nawb.org. Again, that's nawb@nawb.org. So on behalf of the National Association of Workforce Boards, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you will join us again soon.